Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got with me a good group today. Chris Feeney, sales engineer, architect for the channel for IGEL. Chris, how's it going?
It is going well, Andy, as always. Another day in paradise, right?
And you're joining us from Raleigh, North Carolina, right?
I am live and in person, sort of virtually, from Raleigh.
So you're either a person whose allergies go crazy this time of year, or a person who doesn't get impacted by it, other than a little dust kind of thing.
Yeah, usually if I'm out there, in the yard doing stuff, it'll hit me, but not just walking around. When I first moved to North Carolina, the pine trees, man, I was terrible for like a month and a half.
Yeah. If you've never experienced it in North Carolina, everything turns yellow for about a month as the pine trees do their thing. And that's what makes it beautiful. But at the same time, it's painful. And you might as well forget about your car being clean for a month or 2 months. It's impossible. And real quick on that, genetics, right? Half my kids have an issue with it. The other half don't. My wife is horrible with allergies. It doesn't really bother me. I don't know the differences, but it's funny to watch genetics play out, and that being one piece of evidence as to how they play out. Mr. Jeff Kalberg is joining us from the lovely second Queen City of Cincinnati, I think.
The second Queen City?
What's that?
I don't know. I think we might have been the first Queen City. I'm not sure.
I don't know if you guys know this, but the people in Charlotte like to debate that topic. You guys might not know or care.
Yeah. You remember those days when Cincinnati was, the Western frontier, and everybody and anybody and everybody, launched from Cincinnati as they started to move across the Louisiana Purchase and head out to the Oregon Trail and all that good stuff. But
I'm reading a book with my youngest child. We started last night about the Louisiana Purchase and, St. Louis and Cincinnati and that part of the world and people heading west from there. A little fact for you. What's the industry that drove the growth of Ohio?
That drove the growth of Ohio?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it's got to be.
Oil is going to be probably top of the list.
Well, hold on, Jeff. Let's see what Chris comes up with, because most people don't know this. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going industrial, and I'm going to say the railroad.
Well, it's actually what Jeff said, and I didn't know this either until I was watching a documentary on the founding fathers of America industry. It's actually oil. The first oil boom in the United States was in Ohio, and that's where the Rockefellers got their money.
Little known fact, right? It wasn't all in Texas and Oklahoma.
If it was, you talk about dominating industries.
Yeah.
And controlling, I think at one point Rockefeller controlled 94% of it. It was somewhere in that neighborhood of all of the oil in the United States.
And what did they use it for, Jeff? What was the use of the oil back then?
Oh, back then?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was for lighting your lanterns, your lamps and stuff. It was for, yeah.
It's crazy. I had no idea. And then you
kerosene and those sorts of things.
Heating and oil and light. And I mean, you just take granted, you go in and you flip a switch and the light comes on. They used to have to burn stuff to do it. It's
we talk about removing ourselves from extracting ourselves from fossil fuels, and oil in particular. Where is most of the oil used today?
I assume it's in making electricity.
No. It's in making all your plastics and your clothing and all those things that we use day in and day out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a very interesting slide. I'll have to send it to you, but goes through where all the oil is used. And we step back and we say, whoa, wait a second. If we're going to, we want to get rid of oil from an energy perspective, that's one thing, but you got to look at how oil is used in everything else that we do.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And everything we use. I mean, I look around my office and there's an awful lot of plastic in here.
Yeah.
I do wear all cotton, so I don't know that I have a clothes issue.
You wouldn't be able to make a RX 420 without oil. Isn't that crazy?
That's right. That's exactly right. None of these cameras sitting on top of my monitor would work.
Yeah. All right. So let's stop talking about American allergies and industrial booms. Fredrik, how's it going?
Everything is fine. Thank you, Andy, for having me. So I had my fair share of allergies too, where spring is the worst part of the year. But I have good drugs. So I'm good.
Do you guys have allergies that kick in over there? Have you been over in the southern part of the United States during this time of year before?
Yes, I did, but actually I never had issues while being in the US, only here in Sweden, actually. So a few times when traveling to Germany, but mainly only at home.
So we were chit-chatting before this, and we were talking about spring, and that's how we got in this whole conversation before we hit the record button. And you were mentioning that tomorrow may be the last snow prediction for you for the year, and then spring.
Yeah, and that's crazy because we're in the middle of spring, which comes late in Sweden. And today we have 15 degrees of Celsius plus, which equals to about 1,000 Fahrenheit, I guess. And tomorrow we are promised snow.
That's fair enough. We're all gonna die.
I don't know the conversion between Celsius and Fahrenheit.
We have an app for that. There's somewhere in there, there's an app.
Water boils at 100 degrees and it freezes at 0. It's very easy.
Well, we're not out of the woods yet. In Cincinnati, I mean, it's tonight it's going to go to 32 degrees, and tomorrow night it's going to go to 30. So we just have there's no precipitation in the area, or we could potentially get snow, which has happened before in the second half of April. So,
yeah, it's crazy. It really is crazy. It's unpredictable like the weather, but it is the weather. All right, so let's jump into today's topic, which is the part 2 of Fredrik's series on the latest operating system. Let me read the title to you. It's IGEL Releases 11.05.100, which there might actually be one after that. You guys will help me. I think it's 120 unless there's something after that. But check out the new features here, WVD Part 2, covering Zoom VDI offloading with Jeff Kalberg and Fredrik, and much, much more. I mean, you have Kalberg. That should get everybody's attention right there. But Fredrik, let's jump into what was the reason why you did the series, and what spawned part 2 here.
So it's all about the rapid development of the VVD client on IGEL OS for Windows Virtual Desktop apparently, and there has been a lot of requests for unified collaboration, of course, in a Windows Virtual Desktop environment using IGEL devices. And so this blog post actually fulfills a lot of use cases in terms of Windows Virtual Desktop and IGEL. And I mean, it is a big thing because Zoom is the first VDI acceleration or optimization that joins Windows Virtual Desktop group for the Linux side on IGEL. Mm-hmm. To be able to utilize unified collaboration and cameras and audio input and output, of course. Yep. And it works exceptionally well, actually.
And you guys have been doing this for a while. So you can do Zoom optimization, aka offloading, with the Citrix app, the Workspace app, now with the WVD app. Is there another one? What other ones
Horizon.
Can you do with as of this release?
VMware Horizon.
Okay.
For Zoom specifically.
Yeah, Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, this release Zoom, so there's nothing at the moment for Horizon. Although I know that there was an article about a year and a half ago where VMware was focusing on some Teams optimizations.
Yeah, Teams.
But for Zoom, I mean, Zoom has really been at the forefront of enabling VDI, as you said, right? They had the plugin for Citrix, and then they came along with the plugin for VMware. It works very elegantly. And we've been close to Zoom. Wow. I can remember using Zoom the very, very first time back when I was in the field, and it was really, really rough in this first 6-9 months, I can tell you that. But it's been put together very well, and they've recognized the value of in the move to digital workspaces. So we worked with them and encouraged them to develop a VDI plugin for Windows Virtual Desktop and RDS, which they've done. And The beautiful thing is that's in IGEL OS.
Yeah, so help me understand the architecture of that. I learned it a year or so ago when I was dealing with this in the Citrix world. So just to recap what Jeff and Chris and Fredrik just said, you've got Zoom optimization, which is really kind of an offloading type thing that IGEL can do because the proper code has been written for the Citrix virtual app and desktop world, the VMware Horizon world, and now announcing here the WVD world, where people can get a first world type of experience using Zoom, even if they're in a virtual desktop session when they initiate the Zoom connection, right, guys?
Correct. I mean, the very high level architecture of how this actually works is you have more or less a framework running in your virtual desktop in Azure or on-prem or wherever it might be. And then as soon as you start a call, a video call or audio call, of course, what actually happens is that the desktop is telling the endpoint to start up the VVD routines, the client-side routines for Zoom in this case, to allow a peer-to-peer communication between the endpoints that are hosting the call. So like if we were using this technology, now it would be our endpoints talking to each other instead of through the VDI machine or a session. So, I mean, the use case is to reduce the load of the server side and to improve the user experience because it's a shorter path to video.
Yeah, Fredrik, let me pause you on that just to make sure our listeners catch what you just said. There's really two main benefits technically here, and ultimately the main benefit is a better, happier user, better user experience. But the first benefit is less processing needed inside the virtual desktop host, whether that's a server desktop or maybe better, probably more accurate, the VDI Windows 10 client, single session, maybe multi-session. You guys can clear me up on that. But that's to reduce the processing that part needs so that it can be free to do other things. Can you guys clarify, correct me where I was wrong there, or expand on it?
I think that's a byproduct. The fact that we're not using the server to process the communications. But when we're doing unified communications and we're routing stuff up to the server and we're doing we're encoding the endpoint, Citrix ICA HDX, we're running that up there to the server to have it processed and then moved over to somebody else who might be on that same server and then push that back down. Yeah, there's a lot of processing up there, but there's a lot of pinning and the unified communications experience is not acceptable for anybody. And so the technology is to basically, go back to the early days of Citrix when we could do the offloading of browser content and some of the other things. Or I guess probably one of the first ones was offloading multimedia, so we could play videos and have a good experience with videos. That video was being played locally, and we used to move the application around in the window, and the screen would kind of catch up. We're doing that same thing, except using WebRTC or real-time communications locally, which is a point-to-point protocol. So you don't get the pinning. And the real reason to do the offloading is so you can have a good user experience. Yes, you do save on server capacity for sure, but the real reason people are looking for these technologies is to give a consistent, reliable user experience.
So Jeff, if I translate that into technical terms, you're looking for the shortest path, AKA least latency, with the least resistance, AKA the least amount of bandwidth consumed. That's basically what it does, and the end result is a happier user experience, right?
That would be correct. So now, right now, case in point, let's see. You guys I'm going to guess you're all running locally, yes?
Well,
my desktop is in the cloud. Okay, but I'm part of this conversation, and my video and my voice is perfectly synced with everything else. But my video and voice conversation is going directly to each of your machines, in essence.
Right. Yeah, I think that would have been great. Had we all been smart enough, we'd have done exactly that, and we could have, celebrated ourselves and and did a surprise moment. But Jeff doing it is a great example of how it can work. And Jeff, we're specifically talking about the bidirectional video that's happening with all of us right now, and the bidirectional audio. Those are things that when we have a WAN scenario or an internet-based scenario, trying to route that through our virtual desktop and then back down to us just creates extra latency where we have a jittery, jerky, even a second or two delay in everything we say, getting back and forth to each other. It's kind of like a cell phone conversation in the 90s. It just wasn't happy experience, but it's all we used to have. Now we've got
the 90s.
Yeah.
I remember doing it in the 80s.
And what our workaround was for that in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, was something like Nextel, where you hit a button and it beep, beep, told you it was time to talk, let go, and it beeped again. That way the system kind of told you start, stop, start, stop. And, that didn't last very long. It was really good for communication for a brief period of time, better than what we had before. But the fact that you couldn't have a natural, native feeling conversation with someone, when's the last time you used a Nextel phone?
Well, Sprint bought them, and that technology, that walkie-talkie kind of thing, it may still be out there, but it's not marketed, But back in the day, I knew a few folks that were selling that Nextel, and they crushed it for a long time until Sprint bought them.
Well, you couldn't be the cool guy on a construction site unless you could do that, right? So all of us,
exactly,
guy.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the industry that probably paid bills for years and years. That helped them accelerate things quite a bit. So,
well, Nextel was certainly unique in that feature, and a lot of industries used it specifically because of that.
There was a reason why they were a big NASCAR sponsor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would say Nextel is for me never heard of. So either it's a US thing or it's an H thing.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So here's the interesting psychological play on what Nextel had. Not only was it that ability to communicate, but that little chirp that it made. Like when you heard a guy get a chirp on his belt buckle and then he would talk to somebody, that guy was a really cool guy there for about 5 to 10 years. That was almost like a status thing. If you had the Nextel phone and everybody else was still trying to stumble through an early cell phone conversation.
I was going to say, I bet there was a fair number of Ericsson phones that Nextel used. That makes you feel any better, Fredrik?
Yeah, very much so.
Well, here in Raleigh, Ericsson and Nokia, I think they to check if Nokia, but Ericsson certainly had a presence here for a while. Nortel did as well back in the day. I think they had several brands that they would use as far as manufacturers for those phones, but none of them are what they were at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to this, I think it was 2 S's, Ericsson. Yeah, there you go.
So Fredrik, we used to, our football stadium, American football stadium, used to be Ericsson Stadium. It was such a big presence here in the Carolinas in the U.S.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
In Charlotte and in New Zealand.
In the Queen City.
You're gonna have to go back and look this up.
Yeah. See, when I hear Cincinnati, I'm thinking Cincinnatus, right? The famous Roman general, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that'd be who it is. Exactly. Or Porkopolis, because this is where back in the day when you wanted your pork, it all came from Cincinnati.
So to sum it up before we go too much out of bound, I would say that, the Zoom VDI integration in IGEL OS is astonishing in terms of the quality and the user experience. I know that Jeff is using this day in and day out because he's eating his own dog food. And I think you are quite happy, Jeff.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal experience, and it's and the ability to be part of any conversation, any Zoom meeting, and do screen sharing. That's one of the other things. It's a bit of a challenge, You don't want to be sending your screen up there to the remoted environment either. You want to have that point to point. So
And Jeff,
with this, it was actually pretty simple. So it's VDI only, right? We have to put the Zoom IGEL plugin in a Windows 10. Can it go in a multi-session, or does it have to be single session?
no, multi-session, multi or single. It's your choice.
Okay. And then you also have the Zoom code, the client for this, built into the IGEL operating system for both WVD, Citrix, and VMware, all three these days, right? So all you have to do is check a box, tell it's okay to use it, or does it just work if you turn it on? If it sees it in the VDI, does it just work?
No, you need to enable it in administratively, so to enable the plugin to use the channels.
Okay.
But it's a simple checkbox as most things in IGEL OS. So.
Great. We use virtual desktops here at XenTegra. We most of my salespeople now have IGEL set up in their home offices. We don't even have this turned on. I've got to, after this call, I got to go say, hey, why don't we have this turned on? This is a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. I mean, it's always one of those back and forth discussions. Should we have everything turned on by default, or should we have it turned off by default? But the Zoom VDI plugin needs to be enabled.
Yeah, might as well.
Enable the Zoom VDI plugin on the IGEL side, and then you also have to get the Zoom VDI client, okay, that you install in the remoted host side.
Yeah, I was going to add with that. One of the things that we've also seen is Zoom on the Zoom. On the virtual desktop side, Zoom is coming out with updates to that client, which sometimes they're backward compatible to the VDI plugin component. But definitely check if you're going to be setting this up, which virtual Zoom client version, and then match it up with what we've got. All of our version information is in release notes. So if you ever have any trouble with that, just take a look and match them up.
One thing that I would like to add, actually, the blog article is more than a month old, and just a few days after we released 11.05.100, there was a new release from Zoom, which allows the use of virtual backgrounds.
Yes.
That is not in the version of Zoom that we have in 11.05.100. Jeff, do we have it in the 120?
Oh, I didn't check. I'll be honest, I didn't check.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my virtual background working, but I built a pseudo custom partition package to deploy the latest Zoom plugin to my IGEL OS. So I'm running. What am I running? 11.05.131, I think, which is a private build that we just pushed out. So I'll have to go check. But the main thing I would probably say is it is possible to deploy the latest plugins on top of any version of IGEL OS that's out there, at least 11.05, going forward. And we just need to get that custom partition package. Now, Zoom has always kind of built custom partition packages, and they did that from back in the day before we started integrating the Zoom plugins into IGEL OS as part of the core operating system. So you can still go there and pick up custom partition packages, but we're going to work with Zoom and have them build more of a services custom partition package that you could deploy over top of the Zoom plugins that we provide, and have it just be integrated with IGEL OS. So it'll be a good solution going forward. But if anybody needed that today, there's a way to put the latest plugins from Zoom onto IGEL OS, regardless of version, as long as it's the more current versions of IGEL OS.
Yeah, Andy, I put in, since we're also doing video, I put in 2 links here. The second one, just for the folks that are maybe watching this, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is Zoom has a website where they have, they release their latest VDI client, and then they match it to the VDI plugin. And so this kind of helps you map out if you're installing whatever VDI client in the virtual back end, then you can look at the IGEL OS and see, well, what VDI plugin do we have, what version, and see it from there. And then, of course, as Jeff mentioned, there's somewhere on here, I think there's also the custom partition that could be used in a situation where either IGEL has not updated to the latest plugin or something. And I don't know, Jeff or Fredrik, how often Zoom is releasing these updates. It seems like they're pretty frequent.
Well, it depends. I mean, you kind of get a hint there in terms of when these were released when you look at the last 4 digits.
Yeah, like see, here's like on this page, and you see IGEL 64. So there's the 5.4. That would be let's see here, if I'm reading this right.
That'd be January 9th.
Okay, there you go.
Now, if you click on the IGEL release there, or hover over it, what does it give you in terms of where you're going to go to?
Some kind of VDI media plugin.
It's going to take you to the IGEL. It's going to take you to IGEL Ready. Okay. And unlike the other solutions that are, if you go back over there and you scroll down, and this is going to be different. Any of the others that you might pick up, it's going to actually download a client. It's only the IGEL version that's going to run you off there. If you go down, scroll down and look at the plugin for Windows for WVD, you'll get a little bit of a different different response. So scroll down there and scroll down a little bit further, and then you got Windows Virtual Desktop. There's only Windows and there's only IGEL. So,
yeah.
But if you hover over the IGEL one, I think you're going to go ahead and you'll get a custom partition package from the IGEL side. So you can see it's going to download the zip there.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Because we're integrating that, I suspect that will turn into a link. And the point being, and it could be a little more clear. So for those who are watching this, it could be a little more clear that this is not a mistake. They're taking you to IGEL Ready because Zoom has self-validated the fact that the Zoom plugins are part of IGEL OS, part of the core IGEL OS.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the release notes from 11.5.120, and it says Zoom Media plugin is 5.4.5.9.4.5.8.0.1.0.9, which should be the one that we're looking at right there.
Yep.
So that's the part that's integrated in the IGEL OS piece. And then on the left side of there, that 3.3.3 version, that should be, if I'm not mistaken, guys, that's what's installed on the client side, the
on the server side.
Yeah,
right.
So
on the server side.
Yeah, so it shows what it's mapping to. So hopefully we stay lockstep. So I know I've heard sometimes they have to kind of maybe do that, custom partition piece until we update our media plugin in IGEL OS. But these are good reference pages to check and verify if you're looking at trying this out.
Right.
Hey guys, I have a couple things for you real quick. Zoom, do you guys have any idea what percentage of online meetings today are Zoom versus the others? Is it the lion's share, or is it just...
I read, I was doing some research on that just to kind of see where things stood. And I've seen Zoom's market share in the neighborhood of 40 to 41% use today. So when you look at all the unified communications that are out there, that 41%, that's pretty strong. That's real strong. Cisco, WebEx, and WebEx meetings. So I think WebEx Teams is now WebEx, and old WebEx is now WebEx meetings, and Jabber is Jabber. But I think they were down around 16, 17%.
Yeah.
And Teams is, dominant for sure.
So in the IGEL ecosystem, when it comes to Citrix, VMware, WVD, you guys have Teams, right? You have Zoom now. You have others, right? What other ones can you do something similar to this and optimize it through some type of magic?
Well, I think clearly we support all versions of Cisco at this point, because Cisco, like Zoom, Cisco has stepped up and created their own offloading clients and plugins, if you will. agents that sit on the endpoint and in the server side. So, and that's available for all three of the Cisco solutions, right, guys? Right,
yeah. I'm sorry, I was just reading the release notes. We've got the Cisco JVDI client,
right.
which is the 12.93. This is from 11.5.120, so that would be your Jabber. We've got the WebEx Teams VDI client and the WebEx Meetings VDI client. I think that's all the Cisco stuff.
Right. So that's all three of Cisco's solutions.
Right.
Teams. So Cisco, we're there on all, and that they have that for Citrix, and they have that for VMware. I don't believe Zoom has, or Cisco has anything for Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, although they might support RDS. But I'm not.
To be clear here on that topic, right? Supporting it is one thing, optimize it and working on that user experience.
Yeah, you're right.
Different, right?
No, they're optimized. Yes, that would be proper. And of course, when it comes to Citrix, you've got Teams, and Citrix is taking care of the Teams portion of offloading Teams.
Yeah.
So they're basically handling WebRTC automatically inside the ICA and the Workspace app client. So, and that's not any kind of add-on, it's always there. So,
and on that topic, are you guys having any challenges with the amount of processing it takes on the endpoint to cover Teams and Zoom and Jabber? Any of those that need a little more power on the endpoint side, maybe IGEL running on some type of mid-level hardware or higher?
I would say it. It depends on which quality of the video stream, especially if you are mixing in video. The tools are usually measuring the system performance and sets the resolution of the video stream based on the characteristics of the endpoint device. Mm-hmm. So if you go for the cheapest, weakest machine, maybe you will not get a high definition experience for the user.
Yeah.
But if you go somewhere like mid-range, one step up on the ladder, more or less, you will certainly get at least an acceptable user experience. And also the camera by itself makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, certainly from the Citrix side, what we saw back in October when Teams Opt first came out, if you're reading through the fine print, there's quite a bit there on their site that talks about it. The endpoints requirements are there, like what type of processor, that all the, to at a minimum that you would need. And so you can take that and match it to what we did is, well, which one of our IGEL devices or which ones would meet that or exceed it? Like our UD3, UD7, for example. What about the UD2? Does the UD2 give you, can it do this Teams optimization based on Citrix? And then, of course, IGEL ready devices that from different vendors, what are they equivalently matched to? So, you definitely got to do your research and test. I don't know for WebEx or Cisco what their requirements are. Or Zoom, it's probably out there. I just don't have it at hand, but definitely check those. I think, Fredrik, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, I'm guessing Zoom and maybe has not as stringent requirements versus Teams Opt. Is that an accurate statement, or is that just or roughly the same?
I'm going to guess. Go ahead, Fredrik.
I would say the test that I've done until now, I am slightly better impressed by the Teams, the Zoom integration when it comes to Citrix. In terms of VVD, we cannot talk anything about it, but in terms of Citrix, I would say that the Zoom VDI is giving me a slight better experience in the video call. quicker response time to connect to the camera, and the quality of the video stream is better. But I'm also, from my understanding, Microsoft are also, due to the Corona stuff, Microsoft has also done some throttling of the video streams globally in terms of what it allows for bandwidth usage. I'm not sure if that is valid points, but that's what I heard at least. So
Yeah, no, just that's a good point, because if you look at sort of the diagrams and sort of how all the traffic, kind of back to what Andy was talking about earlier, understanding what's really happening behind the scenes it does matter, and then does Zoom do it exactly the same architecturally as Teams or even WebEx? I think the answer is there's similarities, but there's also some differences.
Hey guys, before we move away from the Zoom conversation, is there anything that we haven't covered that's important that we try to get out through this medium regarding what you guys are doing around Zoom, whether it's WVD, Citrix, VMware, or any other online collaboration solutions? And I'm going to throw one at you real quick. Kalberg and Fredrik, give us recommendations on webcams real quick. What, like, you can kind of go out and buy whatever you want, but at the same time, if you can buy like an enterprise quality webcam for a couple $100, what do you guys see in working that people should be looking towards, not just buying the whatever's on sale at Staples?
So I would say, without being paid by Logitech, I can tell you that the C920, 22, 930, and so on is very good cameras to use in this type of scenarios. I have been testing other brands like Poly and the Microsoft Live cams, which are also very good, but I'm very impressed by the Logitech C920 and upwards. And it's also the ones that are named C920E and C930E also have the H.264 encoder inside of the camera, which allows you to do the hardware encoding of the video stream directly in the camera to reduce that cycles on the endpoint.
Right.
So
and we do have the possibility to enable this in IGEL OS to utilize the H.264 encoder in the camera.
Yeah, Jeff, any thoughts on this topic? I know you and I have talked about it a lot.
I'm in total agreement. I mean, we've tried a lot of different cameras. I'm currently right now using the C920S, which was just the C920. I don't know why the S is on there. Maybe it's S for second edition or something like that, but it's still the old C920. And that's what I'm using right now. But I have a 920E right next to it and a 930E right next to that. And to Fredrik's point, anything that has that E designation have the built-in H.264 encoders, which can help the experience. For me, if I were going to buy one of the ones, the 920E would be a great desktop, for sitting on top of somebody's monitor. The 930E is a wide angle kind of camera. So if you want to show more of the wall behind you or something like that, I mean, I think the 930E would be better used in a conference room and not necessarily at a desktop. You're just paying extra money for something you wouldn't use. Not that it's that much, maybe $30, $40 US.
Yeah. Andy, one thing, this is probably a good opportunity. We couple things, right? We have our IGEL Ready program, and I was just looking to see if they had any kind of officially designated webcams. And then, of course, the IGEL community has this IGEL community or compatibility list. When I just filtered on that with attached peripherals, and there's a bunch of stuff. I put a link in the chat if you want to bring it up on the screen. But again, this is the community testing and reporting, those that do. It's not like an officially IGEL blessed kind of thing, but if you want to kind of get a sense of, hey, what is Joe down the street, that IGEL customer that I talked to at the Citrix user group, doing or whatever, this would be a good way to kind of at least kind of get a sense of what's being tested. And and I can confirm, I like with Jeff, I've got an old Logitech Webcam Pro. I've got a Logitech C90, the HD one that I'm using here for our call. I don't have a plethora of these things. I've got my my built-in one on my Lenovo laptop. I've got another one here, and I think the built-in ones probably are less quality from what I'm seeing, versus the USB ones that are more dedicated. It kind of reminds me of the day when you bought the GPS device in your car. For a time there, it was top end, and then of course cell phones caught up, and now I don't even use one of those GPS devices.
Yeah.
But
I think the short story here is if you buy a Logitech and the model has a C in front of it, you're probably in pretty good shape in an enterprise computing world, and specifically in an IGEL related enterprise computing world, EUC world, right?
Right. Yeah. And again, while we're on this page, for those listening, this is all about sharing, right? If you've got some device or whatever, and you say, I tried this out, share it with the community at large. We all benefit for those that can report, how things are, and you can see what version they tested on or whatever. But I think this gives you quite a bit of options.
So guys, let's move on to the fabulous world of Fabulatech. And one of the hardest things to do in a virtual desktop world is collaboration, audio and video, bidirectional. One of the other hardest things to do is scanning. You guys are talking about Fabulatech being part of the release here for WVD, and we could probably talk Citrix and VMware along the way. Jeff Kalberg, you and I have talked about scanning for years. Help us understand what this announcement is. And Fredrik, if you would, this is your blog, feel free to, maybe we start with you, that you tell us what you guys are announcing here and what it means to our listeners.
Yeah, I can start by the Fabulatech integrations covers all the products for Linux endpoints that Fabulatech has released, and it's first, and what I think is most important is the USB redirection piece, because if you are in a remote environment, eventually you want to connect USB devices of certain kinds that are not using designated channels or functions, so to speak. So the example in the blog is that I'm using a Zytec joystick to connect to my Windows Virtual Desktop environment, because that was the only piece of equipment that I had that didn't have a valid channel to utilize. So instead, to make the joystick appear on the Windows Virtual Desktop side, I used the Zytec. So basically, the Fabulatech USB thing comes in handy when you have stuff that you want to have appearing in the session as a local device, but there is no agents or engines running to support having this device on your VVD environment. The use cases can be very many, especially in manufacturing and retail and so on, that I see. The other thing is the Fabulatech webcam for remote desktop, which we actually had before we had the Zoom VDI plugin. And this enables you to use kind of like HDX webcam redirection in Citrix, but you can do this on Windows Virtual Desktop with IGEL OS and Fabulatech. So make your webcam appear in session, which allows you to address any case of collaboration, because you could use whatever application on server side, like Cisco or BlueJeans or anything, because you have a local, so to speak, virtually locally connected webcam to the VDI session. And in terms of scanners, I leave that field open because I simply do not have a scanner.
So Fredrik, let me ask this question. So let me try to paraphrase what's going on here. So Fabulatech software, allows you to take things that are normally USB connected and send them across into the virtual desktop session so that whatever can be recognized can work across that session. Jeff, is that true? Is that really what we're doing here? We're just making USB devices show up inside the virtual session?
Yeah, yes, no, a little of both. So think back, go back to the early days of Citrix when we were getting started, and we talked about what the ICA protocol was, a bundle of virtual channels, right? That were optimized for different things. There was a keyboard virtual channel, there was a mouse virtual channel, there was a display virtual channel, and different things like this. And then we immediately wanted to have things like I wanted to access a USB stick. Well, hang on a second. If you ever plug a USB stick in and USB redirect it and you try to read that USB stick, the performance is terrible, right? You have to use, Citrix has a virtual channel that uses a virtual channel for accessing block devices, okay? Or storage devices, which is a block device. And what they did is they wrote a client and an agent solution that optimized accessing block devices through ICA. Now, that was the very early days, but let's fast forward to other technologies. We talk about webcam optimization. If we USB redirect a webcam, it's not going to be a very good experience. Okay, with the Citrix as our example here, they've implemented webcam optimization, okay, where they take webcam data, okay, and they collect it locally, okay, and then optimize webcam that information and send it to another client side or host side agent that takes that optimized webcam data and then decodes it and puts it into your desktop. And that makes the webcam optimizations actually work. So now we come back around to what do you do with scanning? Well, scanning, it's a huge amount of data. Okay, so how do you get that large amount of data to move across? I mean, a single page could be, 100 meg. So how do you get that data across to the remoted side where you need to have optimizations for scan data? Okay. And so what we're doing here is we're not USB redirecting scanners. We're accepting the scan data locally, and it's getting processed in such a way that it can be moved across the wire efficiently.
Got it.
And that's what makes that happen.
And what you're announcing here is the fact that the Fabulatech client is built into your operating system for WVD, probably Citrix and VMware as well. And then there's a piece of software you license and put into your virtual desktop that allows that to become usable.
Spot on.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Andy, just on this, at a high level topic, some of the stuff we're talking about, I did put a link in there from our Disrupt last year. Fredrik put together a presentation called Master USB Devices and Remote Desktop, where it talks about some of this stuff we're referring to virtual channel optimization type 1, kind of type 2, and where this would fit in. I believe, if Fredrik, if I'm not mistaken, your blog references optimization type 2, where the USB device is controlled by a driver on IGEL, in this case Fabulatech, and it communicates through that agent to the remote engine over that virtual channel. So that would be the best. Is that considered, I guess, the best optimization type 1?
So it depends. I mean, it depends on the scenario. So if you're using like Teams or Zoom offloading, then you are, in my mind, using type 2, because type 2 is the most advanced thing, which combines actually the possibility not only to process the data locally, but also send the data locally to other hosts, like the peer connection in a video call. The type 1 is you have an agent on the endpoint, and you have the engine on the server side, where the agent feeds the engine with information, like a USB stream or a camera stream or whatever it might be. And the least performant way of doing this is, of course, native USB redirection, where you just extend the the USB cable with a long extension cord between the virtually, of course, between the host and the endpoint, which is native USB redirection.
Hey, God, that was awesome, Chris. I needed that video badly because I've never truly understood where Fabulatech and native USB redirection starts and stops and the differences. I learned a ton. That's great. That's something that I've kind of bounced around in my head for years and never truly understood. This is awesome.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
it's definitely.
I'm about out of time, but this has been a fantastic conversation. Jeff, you know what this feels like to me? It's like being at an expo hall, which you and I have done a bunch of times, without all the distraction and noise. That's the vision I had as we're going through this conversation. And hopefully our listeners get some of that as well out of you guys joining us and talking through this stuff.
Andy, thanks for having us. We really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, certainly.
And with that, we'll wrap it up, guys. Thanks for joining, and we'll do it again in a week or so. At least Chris and I will, and Fredrik and Jeff, we'll have you guys on as often as we can find topics that you guys are interested in and you're willing to join us.
All right.
Well, until the next time.
All right,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.